This is the Chicken Yogi Show, hosted by the Chicken Yogi, Kit Kilstow. Kit is a spiritual mentor who shares spiritual wisdom to help neurodivergent people remember who they are. They believe that we all deserve full liberation and radical self-acceptance and love. Learn more and receive a free gift when you subscribe at chickenyogi.com. And now, this week's show. Hi, I'm Kit Kilstow, the Chicken Yogi, and welcome to the Chicken Yogi Show. On today's episode, I want to talk about neurodivergent burnout and spirituality, and how actually connecting with our spirituality is a good way to battle what I consider the three primary factors of neurodivergent burnout. Quick reminder, when I'm talking about spirituality, I am not talking about organized religion. I am simply talking about connecting with yourself and others in a way that is outside of yourself and possibly connecting with something larger than yourself. Because I believe that we are all connected on this little blue dot in the universe. And it is the realization that we're connected and our connections to one another that really is the root of spirituality. So again, just for those of you who may have concerns, a lot of people equate spirituality and religion. I do not, and I'm a religious studies graduate student, so I've got a little bit of academic bona fides here, but the spirituality that I'm talking about is simply making that connection with yourself and connecting yourself with the wider world, whether that's through a pet, through nature, through the people you share your life with, through feeling like you're part of a global community. That is spirituality. So let's talk about how that spirituality or that flavor of spirituality can battle what I consider the three main causes of burnout. I've talked about burnout before. I've talked about what I consider my big burnout that really is what I'm using as a basis for my conversations I'm having with you about burnout. I'm hoping that what I'm saying resonates with you. I'm hoping that that feels like it is correct for you, and I'm hoping that it helps you. But I also just wish to remind our listeners that I am speaking for myself. That's all any of us really can do. And in the hopes that by sharing my experience, you see some resonance, some echoes of your experience with it, and that may help you through the long night of the soul, the spiritual crisis that a lot of times burnout can bring. So let me talk about, just briefly, because I've mentioned it before, what I consider kind of the three main reasons why we get burnout. And that's too many demands, overwhelm. That is dissonance. Those demands that we're doing are not resonating with us, with our true purpose, with what we really want to be doing. And a disconnect. In other words, we are disconnected oftentimes from ourselves, first and foremost, when we are headed into burnout, because we kind of shut down that part of ourselves that says, hey, this isn't working. And a lot of times we do that because in the society we live in, we have to do the things we do. I mean, most of us live in a capitalist country. Capitalism is the global paradigm that everybody has to deal with. And capitalism says that you have to, pay money for shelter, for food, for the so-called rights that you would have, under, say, for example, the UN Charter, the right to shelter, the right to food, the right to health care, that at least here in America and in many places around the globe, these things cost money. These things cost more money than the average person usually makes. And so we kind of get stuck in this cycle. Add on to that, whether you're a caretaker, a sole provider, do you have children? Do you have older family members? Do you have community members that you care for? And a lot of this becomes demands. And that's even without adding in the demand of living as a neurodivergent person in a neurotypical world, which means going to work every day for us is much more difficult. We deal with a lot more than our neurotypical counterparts because of sensory overwhelm, emotional overwhelm, task overwhelm, ambiguity in the tasks that we do. We have the stories and the messages that have been told to us for most of our lives. This creates negative self-talk. This creates kind of an overwhelming weight. And all of these things basically at one point or another eventually cascade down upon the neurodivergent person in the form of burnout. What I have found is that if I can be aware of where I'm getting disconnected from myself, and for me, that involves, self-talks, saying things like, I don't matter, my thoughts don't matter, my needs don't matter. Once I get into that mode, that tells me I'm disconnected from myself. And I'm sure that will sound familiar to a lot of you because I hear it online in the communities I interact with. And then we have the dissonance. So, full disclosure here, although what I would love to be doing is bringing you this type of content full time, I would love to be facilitating the Chicken Yogi Club, the membership group. It's only $7 a month, where we come together, we do a little bit of group coaching, a little bit of socialization, a little bit of some spiritual work, some getting in touch with ourselves. Nothing too demanding because nobody needs more demands on their life, but creating a community space. I would love to be facilitating that full time. I am not. I have a day job. And so when you put all that together, then I have to be aware of that. And so that day job, I am learning to come to grips with it a little bit better than I have been because I can see where it's aligned with some of my interests and some of the things I do. That doesn't mean I don't get frustrated. That doesn't mean I don't get angry, but I can at least kind of reframe, to use the psychology term, the way I think about it and set some boundaries in my relationship with it that help keep me from burnout and help keep that dissonance from overwhelming. So we've talked about the demands, the dissonance, and the disconnect. And I think the 3Ds, I really like that kind of model. I may not have used those exact words before, but I really like, demands, dissonance, and disconnect as kind of the root of all ills, all of our troubles in one way, shape, or another. So what does spirituality do for this? Wouldn't spirituality in this type of landscape simply be another demand? And that's a good question to ask. It can be a demand if you make it a demand. However, what I would recommend is that, especially if this is new to you, if this is something that you're willing to try, is that you start small. You don't dive in head first. You don't go for a master's degree unless it's something that you're truly passionate about and something that you feel like you can use going forward. I have other projects in which I can use that religious studies training, and I hope to share those with you at some point. But you start small. If you try to force it, then it becomes something else to do, something else to check off on your to-do list app if you used one of those. So again, I'm going to speak from my own experience. Something that I have wanted to do for a very long time, I am pagan, I am polytheist, is have a closer relationship with the deities that I am close to. I mean, I care for my horses every day. And Epona, who is a Celtic horse goddess, who is also worshipped in Rome. I'll try not to info dump on you. I feel like I honor her and I work with her every day because I'm taking care of my horses. I'm seeing to their well-being. I'm spending time with them. I'm giving them kisses and hugs, whether they want them or not sometimes. But I feel like I have a really good relationship with them. Likewise, I write stories about Taiki and Fortuna, And I do that at parimpar.club, PARIMPAR.club. If you want to check them out, they're free. They're set in my fantasy world that I write in. And so again, I feel like that gives me a direct connection. But there are other deities that I have spoken to over the years, or who have spoken to me. And so one of the things I do is, it is now part of my morning routine. I come into my office cabin. I start that very important first cup of coffee, and then I light a stick of incense. I like incense. It smells good. It's always been something I've very much enjoyed and have a lot of around the house. And so I light that morning stick of incense. I say thank you. I offer gratitude there at my altar, and then I can go about my day, and I don't feel like I've neglected the gods. I don't feel like I've neglected my spirituality. It is simply now, it's become built into a part of my routine, to the point where if I get busy and I don't do that, I'll look over and realize I don't have a stick of incense, finished, either burning or finished burning in the incense holder. I'll be like, oh, I didn't do that. And I'll go do that real quick. It's a 5-minute, or at most 5-minute thing that I do that gets me out of my head, out of my own thoughts, and connects me to my spirituality. Now, I'm not saying you have to light a stick of incense, and I'm not saying that a stick of incense a day will keep the burnout away. I wish it was that easy. I really do. But what I'm saying is that finding small rituals like that. If you have a dog and you have to walk your dog, going outside and just using that time to be mindful in the moment, with your pet, with your companion animal, with the outdoors. Really notice what you're seeing around you, regardless of what that is. I hope that that's some green space, because green space is very healing, but I'm also aware that not everybody sadly has access to green space, or a lot of it. So, be mindful. Just be in that moment. Use that time to just breathe. That would be another way to work that in. But find the ways to work that connection into your life. It doesn't have to be full out yoga and meditation. Those can be things that you do. Those are things that I enjoy, and I hope to share with you here soon, as I get some things in order. But they don't have to be, because you can find that connection. Maybe it's stepping outside, and again, if you are able to get away from city lights, maybe it's stepping outside and looking at the stars every once in a while. That's a very beautiful thing to do, a very connecting thing to do, to remind us that, hey, there's this whole universe out there. We can't see it a lot of the time, but it exists, and we are not alone. Maybe that kind of connection is reaching out online. Somebody posts something and just saying, hey, you're not alone. I understand. I'm sending lots of love, sending lots of care, whatever language feels natural to you. Something like that would also be a good way to foster that connection. And so again, what that connection does is it reminds us, first of all, that we are not alone, that we are humans having a very human experience, and that everybody's going through something. And when that happens, for me personally at least, that helps get me out of my head, out of my thoughts, so that way I can spend more time and be more mindful. Something as simple as, here in the office, I've shared pictures of Skittles, the office cat. Here, sometimes it's just a matter of, okay, I'm getting I can feel the overwhelm. I've gotten to the point now where I can recognize autistic overwhelm, and when I might be on the verge of a meltdown, and be like, okay, I need to step away. So I step away and I go pet my cat for a little bit. Or I step outside. A good one here, and why I really appreciate the fact that my job allows me to work from home, is I can step outside and go talk to my horses a little bit, feed them a couple horse cookies, maybe scratch behind their ears, something to get me away from a computer and out of my own head. And that to me is what spirituality does. That I think is the hidden power of spirituality, and the power that's not talked about enough. That you don't have to believe in deities. You don't have to believe in divinity. you don't even have to believe in a higher power. I mean, you can have this type of connection and be an atheist. You can feel like you're connected to other people. What I'm talking about is not the sole property of spirituality. That is how I call it. That is the words that I use. But being connected to the universe, realizing that we are on, one planet orbiting the sun, then there's other planets and there's other suns with other planets, that type of connection. And I use that astronomy example a lot because, one, I find that personally powerful. Watching space documentaries, it just kind of blows my mind. I wouldn't call myself a STEM person where I don't, math. The science that I have been introduced to is more biological science, psychology. My mom was a nurse. And so the hard sciences, physics, chemistry, that's all kind of a foreign language to me. But I don't have to understand it to appreciate just the wonder of some of these documentaries that we watch on some of the different streaming channels. That's my spouse is a space guy. He knows way more about that than I do. He's probably forgotten more about that than I'll ever know. And so that's a way that we connect. We connect through our mutual love of Star Trek, our mutual love of space, of astronomy. He gets to teach me things. I get to teach him things about my interests, astronomy and space being one of his special interests. And again, that connection, that learning, taking time to be with somebody else or taking time to be with another being, or even realizing that there are other beings on this planet. All of that, I think, helps to drive or to keep burnout at bay. It puts burnout in remission, to use the language that I prefer to use. It keeps burnout in remission for me because I know I can now recognize the signs when I'm headed into burnout, so I can start to take proactive steps to keep it in remission. But also it helps just strengthen kind of that muscle and strengthen my connection muscle, which again removes the dissonance, removes the disconnect, removes the demands, because I'm able to balance everything better. So I don't want to belabor the point. I don't want to get into a lot of psychobabble about it, because I feel like there is a lot of psychobabble right now in the mental health and especially in the neurodivergent space. And it's not all good for us. And I suspect that I feel a podcast coming on about that. So for now, I think I'm just going to leave you with this, that finding ways to counteract demands, dissonance, and disconnect. If you can find ways if you can figure out where that's happening in your life and counteract those things, that is very important to help keeping burnout in remission, especially as a neurodivergent person. So thank you so much for listening to the Chicken Yogi Show. I appreciate the fact that you're here, that you're listening to the show. If you could, please feel free to like, follow, subscribe on all of the podcast platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music. Head out to my website. There's a list of all of them, including some obscure ones. And if anything I said resonates with you, give me a like or a follow on. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Mastodon. Mastodon is a little more everything, so it's a little more potpourri. Likewise, my Instagram is a little more potpourri. I hope to get that active again. But all those links are on my website, chickenyogi.com. And if something that I have said has moved you, I encourage you, if you have the means, please don't feel guilty if you don't. But if you, drop a tip to your podcaster, I appreciate that. All of that money goes directly to health and wellness and homestead needs. I'm not a big company. There's none of that going to a big company. And so, any tip the podcaster. If you hear this on Muse Charmer Network, which distributes us, tip Muse Charmer Network. Whatever works for you. And if you want to check out the Chicken Yogi Club, subscribe to my newsletter. I'm going to be relaunching it here probably later this summer. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you take care. And as always, please be kind to yourself so you can grow and flow. Thank you for listening to the Chicken Yogi Show, hosted by the Chicken Yogi, Kit Kilstow. Kit's passion is creating neurodivergent liberation in all its forms through spiritual and creative mentoring. Remember who you were before you were told who you couldn't be. The Chicken Yogi Show is distributed on the Muse Charmer Network. Learn more at chickenyogi.com and subscribe to our newsletter while you're there for a free gift. Please follow the podcast at podcast.chickenyogi.com or on your favorite podcast app or platform, and check out all the shows on the Muse Charmer Network at musecharmer.com. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Music is Running with the Horses by Purple Planet Music. Their website is purple-planet.com. This show is copyright 2024, all rights reserved by the Chicken Yogi and Kit Kilstow.